Welcome to Leaders Lift, episode 31. I'm Greg Cunningham, and I'm glad that you joined me for today's episode. Now, I've had a lot of experiences in the last few years that are definitely out of the norm for me and my family. As I look back at those experiences, there are insights that I can see now that I definitely missed when I was in the midst of them. I'm talking about the kind of experiences, positive and negative, that really push you out of your comfort zone or towards doing something you've never done before. Now, let's be honest, when you're in the midst of these kinds of things, it can be very difficult to focus on much more than just getting through them. And that's okay. But if you can be a bit more deliberate during or even right after some of these experiences, then that's a good way to move further down the path towards getting the absolute most out of life. So let's spend just the next few minutes talking about this. Now, before I get started, I just want you to know I'm working a lot on refining some of the videos and stuff that I put on the YouTube channel. I'm hoping to release maybe a couple of shorts a week or some smaller chunks of the video. I absolutely publish will continue to publish the entire podcast episode on YouTube, but I'm going to try and put some more content up on the video side of things. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's at Leaders Lift, LDRS LFT on YouTube, or just search for Leaders Lift on YouTube and you'll find it. There's also a link to it in my show notes. Subscribe now so that when I really get that stuff going, you'll automatically be notified of all the new content. Now, this comes from another podcast that I do, which is called Gadgets for Families. So if you're looking for a tech podcast to help you get more out of life, you can go search for that, Gadgets, and then the number 4, Families. That's on YouTube as well. And we're trying to do the same thing over there. So give those channels just a look and like, share, all of that kind of stuff on YouTube. But then also for the podcast, don't forget to subscribe, follow, like, share, and let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover by using the feedback form. And there's a link to that in the show notes as well. Now, as I dive into today, I just want to give you a disclaimer. This is not something I'm great at doing. And my latest experience that just happened last week and going in over the weekend is proving that. I have some ideas of what I should do and what I can do during these kinds of experiences that really push us. But my default is still to rub some dirt on it. And you can see episode 27 if you want to learn more about that. I want to rub the dirt on it and just try and power through things as if nothing has changed. And sometimes we have to do that. But that may not always be the best approach. I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that episode for more on how to deal with hard things. But today, I hope I'll approach this similar topic just a bit differently. Now, what kinds of experiences am I referring to? Well, generally, I'm talking about those kinds of experiences that provide resistance and opportunities to grow, which generally means they're tough experiences. Now, they can still be positive experiences, things that we know help us grow and, those kinds of things. But a lot of times they're going to feel more negative. And they may not feel positive at the time, but when we look back, we may think, oh yeah, it was a really great experience, even though while you're in the middle of it, it doesn't feel that way. And let me talk about just a few personal examples around this. So we've had several funerals in the last year, and that includes my mom. And then just last week, my dad passed away. They were passed away about 95 days apart, so not a lot of spread between those two. And all those funerals, they're tough, right? No matter what the circumstances are. But if I go back even further, since 2019, the end of 2019, I've been laid off twice. We've gone through this global pandemic, and there are definitely some things I wish I had done differently during that pandemic, and I may talk about a few of those as I get further into this episode. I've also been trying to build a business from scratch. I tried that once, then I went to work for a company, and now I've come back to it, and I'm still working on this. It's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're talking about all of the economic uncertainty that's out there. We've had all of our kids move out, but then we had my grandkids and my oldest daughter move back in with us, so that one's still ongoing. So these are all some examples of things that I have faced that have really stretched me and pushed me out of my comfort zone. And there are definitely some positives in there, but there are also some things that were pretty darn tough as I go through that. Other examples of things you may be facing, you could have a family member that's going through a really tough time and you're trying to provide support and help them work through whatever it is that's going on in their life. Relationship challenges are another really good example of tough things that hopefully we learn from, but things that can happen in our lives. Working towards a goal only to come up short at the end. Think about the home buying process. If you put in a bid and everything seems going well and it seems like it's the perfect home, and then things fall apart right at the end. Think about working towards a promotion in the professional world. If you're focused on your development plan and working towards that promotion, just the journey of getting there could be super, super tough, but then maybe it falls apart at the end. Getting tough feedback from a boss, if you go into a quarterly or an annual review cycle, whatever you may face, getting some feedback from a boss that says you really aren't doing as well as you think you are, that can be a tough situation and things you have to work through. And then one that I've talked about a whole bunch over the last several weeks or months even is realizing you may be on the wrong path and need to do a major course correction. I just had a conversation with someone yesterday for over an hour where we talked about this, and it isn't so much that they realized that they're on the wrong path as it is they realized that they needed to course correct. And those types of things are tough. I mean, as I talked to him, he's really struggling with this decision, doesn't want to run away from things, doesn't want to run away from his dreams, is not sure if his dreams have changed. And I've talked about a lot of those kinds of things, but those are not easy things to go through and are definitely things that stretch us and make us really think back through some of the things I've talked about, like what's most important in our lives, have our goals and objectives changed, and all of that kind of stuff. So hopefully between my personal examples and then some of these, you can find something and say, yeah, I can relate to that. That's what makes sense. One of the keys here is trying to take advantage of those times and those experiences. And so here's just a few tips. Again, my disclaimer is this is not something that I'm perfect at. I mean, my dad passed away last week, and since then I've just struggled wanting things to be normal, right? Thinking I need to continue to power through and do all my work and not rest. And I've actually been pretty sick. That didn't help getting that news. And so just that idea of saying I need to slow down and just rest and take care of myself. I've talked about this being a struggle for me. I had a hard time even this weekend doing that, even though I'm talking to you about it right now. And I've been talking about these things on my podcast for months now. I still have a hard time sometimes putting these things into practice. And so these tips I'm going to give you, I hope what you'll do is you'll find one or two things that maybe can help you. Don't try and tackle them all at once. I don't think that's a good idea. And remember, you might not be able to do some of this right in the middle of your experience, but maybe afterwards you can go back and do some of this. All right, so taking advantage of the times, whatever's going on in those experiences that you're going through, some of that ties into being able to focus on the present. I mean, I know if we're going through really tough times, we just want to say, okay, I just need to get through this. I just need to get through this. But sometimes we need to take a step back and just focus on what can I take advantage of right now, right? There's a present moment. I'm going through something. What can I do right now? So here's a few questions that maybe you can think about. One, what can I learn from this situation that I may not learn any other way? When my dad passed away, I had a good friend tell me that I need to think about some of the good memories that I had with him so I don't lose those. And that's a great example of something that maybe I wouldn't take time to do otherwise. So what can I learn from this situation that I may not learn any other way? What could I be doing now that I can't normally do or may never get an opportunity to do again? I've told this story before, but when I got laid off on early December of 2019, I thought immediately, I got to get back to work. I got to get back to work. I got to get back to work. And I reached out to someone that had said they needed help in a particular area and ended up being a great client of mine. But his advice to me was, take care of yourself and your family through the holidays. Don't try and cram all of this stuff in on top of the holiday season. And I took that advice, and I'm very grateful that I did. I took some downtime. And so maybe it's not downtime. Maybe it's getting some additional education, or, if you've got a family member that's struggling, maybe you can prioritize to spend more time with that family member. So what could I be doing now in this situation that I can't normally do or may never get an opportunity to do again? Another suggestion that I got over the weekend, I did not do this one, but because my brain just wouldn't focus on really important things, was to, you know, play a game I haven't played in a long time, or start a new video game, or, whatever the case may be. I don't know what it is for you, but what are some of those things that you can't normally do, or you may never get an opportunity to do again? So think about that in your situation. And then the third question that maybe you ask yourself, and this kind of looks towards the future, but will help you focus in on the present, is how will I be better because of this situation? And that one sometimes is hard when you're in the middle of this, because you're thinking, I don't know, there's nothing good about this situation that's going on right now. But how will I be better because of this? If I get through this, I'll be able to help other people going through something similar, or I'll have learned a lesson, or, if I think about getting laid off, how will I be better than this? Well, maybe I'll find a better job, or I'll get my personal business where I want it to be. How will I be better, or how will life be better because of this? So those three questions: what can I learn from this situation that I may not learn any other way? What could I be doing now that I can't normally do, or may never get an opportunity to do again? And how will I be better because of this situation? Okay, so those are three questions. Then some other things that can come up. Now, again, if you can't do this when you're right in the middle of the thing because you just need to focus on getting through it, that's fine. But try and do some of this right after, because sometimes these moments in our lives can dramatically change what we're focused on, where we want to go with life. And so here's some things that you can reflect on either while you're in the middle of this. If you unfortunately have some illness that means you're laid up or have to rest for long periods of time, or whatever the case may be, and you're going to go crazy if you don't do something active. And, for me, I'd probably want my laptop or my iPad with me. But here's some things you could reflect on, and maybe even do something like some journaling on this stuff. One, what matters most right now? So what I should have been able to do over this weekend is say, what matters most right now is me resting enough that my body can heal and my mind can heal to a certain extent, so that I can get back to these things that I need to be focused on. I did okay. I didn't do great with that. I did rest some, but I found myself doing things that maybe I shouldn't have been doing. But the worst part about that was the guilt, the mental guilt that I felt the whole time, thinking I should be doing more, I should be doing more, I should be actively doing something. But focusing in on what matters most right now helped me at least a little bit. So that's one thing. What matters most right now as I'm going through this thing? And then the second question follows up on that, which is, what matters most in my life in general? And I will tell you that losing both of my parents has given me kind of a new desire. I don't know. I mean, I've always been family oriented, but now I think more about, I've got one person in Houston. I've got another one that just went away to college. My grandkids are close at the moment, and we've thought about what we want to do next in our life. And it's given me a new perspective, or at least made me reflect on my perspective on what I want to do with my core family, right? So what matters most in my life in general? And then the other thing that follows up on these two, if what matters most in my life in general has changed because of these situations, or changed over time and I just didn't realize it, then the next thing to reflect on is, are there course corrections that I'd like to make? So what matters most right now? Try and focus on that. What matters most in my life in general? And then, are there course corrections that I'd like to make? So we've been talking about a couple of things we could do now that our family's a little more spread out, Zoom calls or whatever the case may be, to try and stay close, and trying to figure out a better way to approach the holidays coming up. So there are some course corrections that I've thought of coming out of these experiences. So let me recap those. What matters most right now? What matters most in my life in general? And are there course corrections I'd like to make? And if I go back, you start this with asking yourself these questions. What can I learn from this situation that I may not learn any other way? What could I be doing now that I can't normally do, or may never get an opportunity to do again? How will I be better because of this? And then leads into reflecting on what matters most right now, what matters most in my life in general, and then what course corrections would I like to make? Now, related to what I just said about maybe making some changes in how we do family calls and stuff like that, is when I look back at the pandemic, I wish I had done a better job in a few areas. One is that family time stuff. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot you could do unless you were working remotely, right? And so family was home a lot. And fortunately, I was a consultant and was able to work remotely and do a bunch of that kind of work. But if I think back to what could I have done differently, I could have spent more time, especially in the afternoons or in the evenings, and spend time with family and do gaming, or we've got a big backyard, or going for walks together. And we did try and get out and go camping once that became available and do some of those kinds of things. So if I look back, I wish I had done some of these things during the pandemic, because I would have made changes, because it was a pretty long time, right? I would have made changes during the pandemic and done some things differently. I hope that makes sense. Now, as I transition away from that focus on the present, right, and some of those questions to ask yourself and things to reflect on, just be cautious that I don't want you to overthink things. And as I transition into looking a bit to the future, that doesn't take away from kind of being present in the moment, like the pandemic, right? Oh, as soon as we get out of the pandemic, this is what we're going to do. And that kind of stuff, instead of just taking advantage of this. A more real example, right? I've got all three of my grandkids here, and it's amazing most of the time. It's really tough sometimes, but it's amazing most of the time. And I've had to learn that if the youngest one wants me to go do something with him, like I wasn't feeling great yesterday, but he came and grabbed my hand, it took me down, and just wanted me to lay on the floor so that he could climb all over me. That's what little kids do, right? And so learning to take advantage and be present during those kinds of moments is important. And to think that all I want to have the thought that, well, once my daughter gets on her feet, they can get their own place, and to start focusing on some of those kinds of things, it's real easy to look at that future that you want to have and not take advantage of that present time. So just that caution again. With that being said, I do think you want to look just a little bit to the future. I already mentioned that when you start to reflect on what matters most in life in general, and are there course corrections I'd like to make. But here's a couple of things about looking to the future that may help as well. One will be, what will be different when this too passes? Because most of these things are going to pass, right? How will my life be different? What will it have changed? If I think about getting laid off, what is going to be different now? Well, I'll have gone through this experience and I'll know better how to handle it if it ever happens again. Or, I'm going through this rough time at work where I've gotten some negative feedback from my boss and I'm having to really work to correct it. Well, what will be different? Well, I'll have learned a whole bunch of things and hopefully improved in certain areas so that I don't run into this again. If you've got a family member that's struggling with something, what will be different when this too passes? Well, if they're able to work through this and you're able to help them, then hopefully you'll have a better relationship and they'll be in a better spot and find more joy and peace in life, right? I mean, those are some of the things that you can try and look forward to. So what will be different when this too passes? Number two, how will I apply what I've learned? If I think about my business, right, I think about the things I've learned about myself getting laid off these couple of times. And there are some pretty big lessons that I learned. And I've been thinking about transitioning the business yet again. And as I started to work through that, I had more insights, right, that about why I wanted to transition the business. And so those are things that I wouldn't have gotten if I hadn't tried to think about, how am I going to apply what I've learned about myself? What do I know about myself? What do I like about running my own business? What do I not like? Some of those kinds of things. And so this is that question. How will I apply what I've learned? How is it going to help me move further down the path to my most potential? And then the third question, how will I be better prepared for something similar happening in the future? And so if I think again about layoffs, right? If I get laid off, then I want to have income stored up, right? So that I don't have to stress so much if I get laid off and don't have any income coming in for a while. That's just one example. There's tons of those that you can think about. But so here are the three questions, kind of looking a little bit to the future. What will be different when this too passes? How will I apply what I've learned? And how will I be better prepared for something similar if it happens in the future? So, again, I don't claim to be an expert at applying any of these principles. And again, I struggled with this even over the weekend. But as I look back at the last few years, I wish I had tried to do at least a few of these things more deliberately. I think if I had, I wouldn't look back as much on these experiences and think, oh, I could have done something different. I could have grown so much more from these experiences. And now, a word of caution again, don't try and do all of these every time you run into this kind of experience. Sometimes, literally, you just need to get through it. So, I think if you try and do all of this all the time, it becomes way too much. But maybe pick the key ones that apply the most in that specific experience, or even, like I said, just right after the experience, reflect back, then figure out, okay, what am I going to do differently? That way, you know you're better off for the experience. I mean, it's one thing to get through an experience that's tough and you're going to grow from that, but it's something else to deliberately try and pull the lessons out of that and learn from it and grow from it. Be deliberate about that. You may not be able to be deliberate about the experience coming because sometimes those things just come because of life, but you can be more deliberate about what you learn from those experiences. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. I know there's a lot of personal experiences and stuff in here, and maybe that disclaimer about I'm not perfect at doing this makes you wonder if this is really going to work, but doing these things will work for you, at least some of them. You can find the one that's most specific for you. I just hope that as I'm going through some of these experiences, that what I share can help you if you face them in the future, or if somebody you know is facing them. So if you can get just one thing out of all these things I talk about, then it'll be worth it. So thanks again for sticking with me until the end. And until next week, go out, find someone to lift, even if that's yourself. Help lift you or someone else out of these tough experiences, and let these tough experiences become true learning experiences. Thank you, and have a great day.